All right, good morning, everybody. Back at it again with another MLB DFS video. So before we get into today's slate, we're just going to recap yesterday. So if you follow us on Twitter and you saw our lineup, we projected, I think it was around 130 something. You were telling me, Funk, we were projected around there, and we ended up with 157. Gallon got a 64. He ended up pitching 7 innings with 11 Ks. Goldie got 19, which is pretty good. Corey Seager, 34. Renfro's home run got us at 27. Contreras, I think we need a break from him. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, those were like the key highlights from our lineup that got us to 157. What did you think about yesterday? Anything I missed?
Um, so like we said yesterday, pitching was kind of iffy, at least in terms of pricing. And like we started the day liking Milwaukee, and as the day went on, we're like, dang, do we really like Milwaukee, or do we just take a shot on Gallon and his talent? So where we landed on our stacks, we were left in Gallon's price range. We landed on Gallon. He absolutely crushed, just mowed Milwaukee down. And then our second option was Heaney at 7,800 just because of the price. And he also did really well. He gave a run in the first inning and then looked good after that. And Kansas City just has not looked the same. Like last year, they did sort of the same thing where they started super slow, got hot in the middle of the season, then dropped off again. So they might do the same thing here. I mean, they've been one of the worst offenses in baseball to start the year, which is why DeGrom is going to have some hefty ownership today. We'll get to that in a minute. But other than that, I mean, we didn't land on the Dodgers, and they hit three out and two from Muncy, and that was typical of him. Um, what else was there? Sean Murphy had a pretty good game. He had about 40 at like 3% ownership for the Braves. He was pretty cheap, so if you got there in the four hole, you know, congrats. Anything else? I mean, Castillo was kind of a letdown. I think for most people, he's probably about 20% owned, and he went 6 innings, but gave up a couple in a low scoring game and didn't get the win. I think that
I think
was,
I was I think I was telling you, oh yeah, we should go Castillo. And then you were like, no, hold on. And I was like, thank God. It
yeah.
almost seems like there's a lot of times that I'll say, oh, like you'll say, like, oh, this pitcher, this batter, this pitcher, and this batter. I'll be like, oh, go with option one. And then option two just outscores by like 30. It's
Yeah,
unbelievable.
that's the problem with playing a single lineup. Like we do, we get stuck usually on between like one or two good options and then coin flip, and then the coin just does us wrong. But I'm excited for today's slate. Pitching looks pretty good here. It's actually a pretty tough choice, I think, up top between the two studs, DeGrom and Otani, and then even Manoa looks pretty good here. So we can start with pitching if you want.
Yeah, that's cool. So it's kind of hard to get away from DeGrom or Otani. DeGrom's projected for 35% ownership and Otani 21. You can't really go wrong with both, but I know you and me are, if we had to choose, we'd probably go DeGrom just because Kansas City's offense has been pretty crappy to start the year. Um, Otani isn't that bad of an option. You're paying $200 more for him, but playing against Washington, I mean, and Washington won yesterday. So, I mean, having Otani on the mound definitely makes a difference. Otani's projected for 21% ownership. Those are definitely your top two priorities. I would go if you, for whatever reason, want to get different, which isn't really a bad thing. I would go with Manoa. He's at 9,900 playing against the Tigers, and he's projected for 11% ownership. But I mean, other than that, I wouldn't really go anybody else. Lance Lynn's on the slate. Do not play him. We learned that mistake once, and we're really not going to do that again. Um, what about you? Anything else besides what I said?
Yeah, I mean, Corbin Burns hasn't looked like himself, so I'm just gonna stay away for now. I mean, he's had some tough matchups, but just not going to go to him on with Fanduel being one pitcher. If if you're on DraftKings, maybe he's in play. I haven't looked at the pricing over there yet, but Shohei and DeGrom are probably are clearly the top two. DeGrom is a 9.5K prop, and they're minus 300 favorites, and Otani is a 7.5K prop and minus 300 favorites as well. So you really can't go wrong with either of them. I'll probably lean DeGrom just because of Kansas City struggles, like we said. And he's not even that expensive, 10-7. I mean, people were paying 10-9 for Urias yesterday. So,
Yeah,
um, yeah, DeGrom is
yeah.
probably clear cut for me. Otani second, and then Manoa is like a drop off, and then Lopez is projecting pretty well here. If you don't like the White Sox, I mean, Lopez has looked pretty good to start the year. I think back to back like 40, 45s, I think. And then Dustin May gets San Francisco, who has looked either dropping 15 or dropping one run. So
The
if you think
one
they drop one, you're good.
the one thing I'll say about Lopez is Tim Anderson left the game yesterday. Eloy's on the IL. The White Sox, even despite having them, they'll have their moments where they look good. But I mean, Pablo Lopez isn't a bad option either, besides Manoa if you want to get to Lopez. But I don't know if Tim Anderson's actually out or not yet. It's a little early and they haven't posted anything. But, you know, instead of going to Grom or Otani, which I think you're a bit of a nutcase if you don't get to either or. If you want to go Lopez or Manoa, those are two other options I'd consider. All right, that's enough about pitchers. That was pretty simple. You ready to do sticks?
Yeah, it looks like we're going to go right back to similar teams as yesterday.
I refreshed the data earlier. I'm like, did this even update for today? Because it's practically the same. But
Yeah, that's what happens when there's cores on the slate.
I was just
I
gonna
mean,
say,
and Kyle Freeland on the mound. I mean, St. Louis is just going to project out the wazoo. Looks like they're coming in at like 25% ownership as a stack, 22% top stack odds. Next closest is 8%, so almost 3x the next top stack. So, I mean, you're going to want to get some cards in your lineup from what it seems. Maybe if you want to get off the ownership, just maybe do wraparound with like Yepez or, whoever goes 8-9. But they got power up and down that lineup, and they haven't quite shown it recently. They've been pretty stale, but at some point they're going to drop like 13 and just absolutely bury the field at like 25% ownership.
yeah. So I'll just read off the top five stacks right now on Stochastic: St. Louis, Angels, Rockies, Toronto, Seattle. I don't mind a couple Toronto bets. They're fourth right now. 0.6% leverage, 7% to have the top stack score. Jesus. 5.5 implied team total. So that's kind of a good pivot. I don't know if I would necessarily primarily stack them, but you can definitely get a couple bats off them and hopefully have some good success against Matt Manning. What else was I looking at earlier? You were saying something about home opener for Toronto in like the new ballpark,
Yeah,
something like that, right?
it looks like they made it more advantageous for right-handed bats to go yard. That's just something I heard on a podcast like a few weeks ago. Um, but I'm just going to take some shots here and hope that the new park plays well. And it's already projecting as the third best park today, not including the new park factors that they can't really project right now. So I like some Toronto bats. And then if you're gonna go to Wrigley with the wind blowing out and it's warmer than usual, can't blame me there. Seattle let us down yesterday, but they're pretty cheap, and Teoscar is probably batting fourth again and probably like $2,700. So like him and Suarez and the middle lineup, Haggerty. And then the Cubs are projecting pretty well on the batters tool on Ballpark Pal 2. Just some bats here. Madrigal, Hosmer, Horner, Trey Mancini. Like they all look pretty good. So
And if you have stochastic, the Cubs are like pretty much at the bottom, but there's nothing really wrong with that. And that's only because, you know, we have a core slate yet again. And there's obviously other better stacks, but mixing in some Cubs, I mean, Seattle looks pretty good as well. So, well, like when Funk was just reading off some Chicago bats, don't like stack them, but maybe if like a secondary stack to get a little different or maybe a one-off, I guess, but just other bets to like keep in mind. Um, are you getting to any Rangers bets at all? What do you think about that? I think that's a little interesting as well.
I think they're interesting, but after yesterday's explosion, they're probably gaining a little more steam than they should, and I'll probably just not play them. I
That
think there's
makes
probably
sense.
5 stacks I'd rather play before them anyways. So maybe they gain some steam throughout the day just because they dropped like 13 yesterday. Like I think they dropped like 12 last week. I don't know. They've had some high run games, and I'm just not going to be there. And they're projecting to have minus 13, 19, minus 13% run percentage on Ballpark Pal. So
I
yeah.
gotcha. Kind of already went over some bets that you were mentioning. So I think I'm gonna go back to the well with Trout again. If you're doing any, which will probably be kind of popular, but if you do an Angel stack, probably just go back to the well with Trout, Renfro, Rengifo, whatever his name is. I think I said that right. Toronto, if I'm getting to a couple, it's got to be Bichette, Vladdy. Who's that guy you were talking about earlier? The guy that bats like
Varsho.
eight. Does he usually bat that low, like at the
No,
bottom?
he's usually like 5 or 6, and then Danny Jensen was the other one.
That
And
was the one. Yeah,
yeah,
Danny Jensen. That's a good one as well. Um, any other bets that I'm missing out on besides the ones you were mentioning earlier?
um, I don't hate also going back to some Colorado bats. They're projecting look pretty well here again on the opposite side of this ownership well in cores against Mikolas. They have some decent leverage here, and they're projecting pretty well um, in the batter's tool. So maybe like Trejo, Cron, Servant if he starts, Bryant. God, Bryant, he has let me down so much recently. He gets like he's so consistently getting you about like 6, but nothing more than that.
Yeah, he's falling off. Former Cub. It happens.
Yeah.
Um, all right. The best part of this. You ready to talk home runs?
Yeah.
All right, let's hear your three.
So my home run calls, I'm gonna start in that Toronto game. Gonna go Dalton Varsho, going yard in the new park. Um, Second, I'm gonna go Goldie. He's got to get hot sooner or later. I mean, he was on base a couple times yesterday, but didn't go distance. I think today he can. And then Nico Herner for the Cubs.
All right. So, despite Trout going 0 for 5 yesterday, I'm going to go back to Trout facing Josiah Gray. Cool. I'm going to go back with Trout. My second home run call, I'm going to go with Nolan Arenado. Kind of the same thing as Goldschmidt. They got to get hot. They're in quarters. My third home run call, I'm going to go with Byron Buxton just because he's facing Lance Lynn, and Lance Lynn gives up a bunch of power, gets a bunch of hits against him. So, yeah, my home run calls Trout, Arenado, Buxton for today. Um, anything else that we missed? Anything you want to recap or no?
No, I think maybe just go over to top sacks again. So obviously the cards look good here, and then I think you can maybe do. a game stack between Seattle and Chicago, and then some Toronto bets, as well as maybe just writing the hot bats of the Angels. So those are probably my top 5 or 6, and then pretty much a drop off from there.
Yeah, I like those. So if you end up wanting to follow the lineup that we drop, just make sure to follow us on Twitter, Hotshot Fantasy. We try to put it out, what would you say, like 10 minutes before. Sometimes it's not always like that because we're messing around last minute trying to figure out what we like. But yeah, follow us on Twitter. You can ride the lineup with us or fade us completely, whatever you want. But if you end up wanting to check it out, make sure to follow us on Twitter and make sure to like and subscribe.